Chapter 28. Buenos Aires. I lived there for nearly 4 years, until the spring of 1919. I quarreled with my uncle Anastasios. I gave English lessons, I taught the piano, and I felt perpetually in exile from Europe. My father was never to speak or write to me again, but after a while I began to hear from my mother. I glanced at Lily, but now, back in role, she was watching Conchis with a politely interested expression on her face. Lamplight became her infinitely. Only one thing of importance happened to me in the Argentine. A friend took me one summer on a tour of the Andean provinces. I learned about the exploited conditions under which the peons and gauchos had to live. I urgently felt the need to sacrifice myself for the underprivileged. Various things we saw decided me to become a doctor, but the reality of my new career was harsh. The medical faculty at Buenos Aires would not accept me, and I had to work day and night for a year to learn enough science to be enrolled. But then the war ended. My father died soon after, though he never forgave me or my mother for having helped me, both into his world and out of it. He was sufficiently my father to let sleeping dogs lie. So far as I know, my disappearance was never discovered by the authorities. My mother was left a sufficient income. The result of all this was that I returned to Europe and settled in Paris with her. We lived in a huge old flat facing the Pantheon, and I began to study medicine seriously. Among the medical students, a group formed. We all regarded medicine as a religion, and we called ourselves the Society of Reason. We saw the doctors of the world uniting to form a scientific and ethical elite. We should be in every land and in every government moral supermen who would eradicate all demagogy, all self-seeking politicians, reaction, chauvinism. We published a manifesto. We held a public meeting in a cinema at Neuilly, but the communists got to hear of it. They called us fascists and wrecked the cinema. We tried another meeting in another place. That was attended by a group who called themselves the Militia of Christian Youth, Catholic Ultras. Their manners, if not their faces, were identical with those of the communists, which was what they termed us. So our grand scheme for utopianizing the world was settled in 2 scuffles and heavy bills for damages. I was secretary of the Society of Reason. Nothing could have been less reasonable than my fellow members when it came to paying their share of the bills. No doubt we deserved what we received. Any fool can invent a plan for a more reasonable world in 10 minutes, in 5. But to expect people to live reasonably is like asking them to live on paregoric. He turned to me. Would you like to read our manifesto, Nicholas? Very much. I will go and get it, and fetch the brandy. And so soon, I was alone with Lily. But before I could phrase the right remark, the question that would show her I saw no reason why in Conchis' absence she should maintain the pretending to believe, she stood up. Shall we walk up and down? I walked beside her. She was only an inch or 2 shorter than myself, and she walked slowly, slimly, a shade self-consciously, looking out to sea, avoiding my eyes as if she now was shy. I looked round. Conchis was out of hearing. Have you been here long? I have not been anywhere long. She gave me a quick look, softened by a little smile. We had gone round the other arm of the terrace, into the shadow cast by the corner of the bedroom wall. An excellent return of service, Miss Montgomery. If you play tennis, I must play tennis back. Must? Maurice must have asked you not to question me. Oh, come on. In front of him, okay. I mean, good God, we're both English, aren't we? That gives us the freedom to be rude to each other, to get to know each other. Perhaps we are not equally interested in getting to know each other. She looked away into the night. I was nettled. You do this thing very charmingly, but what exactly is the game? Please." Her voice was faintly sharp. "I really cannot stand this." I guessed why she had brought me round into the shadow. I couldn't see much of her face. "Stand what?" She turned and looked at me and said in a quiet but fiercely precise voice, "Mr. Orff." I was put in my place. She went and stood against the parapet at the far end of the terrace, looking toward the central ridge to the north. A breath of listless air from the sea washed behind us. "Would you shawl me, please?" "Would I?" "My wrap." I hesitated and then went back for the indigo wrap. Conchis was still indoors. I returned and put it round her shoulders. Without warning, she reached her hand sideways and took mine and pressed it, as if to give me courage, and perhaps to make me identify her with the original gentle Lily. She remained staring out across the clearing to the trees. "Why did you do that?" "I did not mean to be unkind." I mimicked her formal tone. May I ask you where you live here?" She turned and leaned against the edge of the parapet so that we were facing opposite ways, and came to a decision. "Over there." She pointed with her fan. "That's the sea. Or are you pointing at thin air?" "I assure you, I live over there." An idea struck me. "On a yacht?" "On land." "Curious. I've never seen your house." "I expect you have the wrong kind of sight." I could just make out that she had a little smile at the corner of her lips. We were standing very close, the perfume around us. "I'm being teased." "Perhaps you are teasing yourself." "I hate being teased." She made a little mock inclination. She had a beautiful neck, the throat of a Nefertiti. The photo in Conchis' room made her look heavy-chinned, but she wasn't. "Then I shall continue to tease you." There was silence. Conchis was away far too long for the excuse he had given. Her eyes sought mine, a shade uncertainly, but I kept silent, and she looked away. Very gently, as to a wild animal, I reached out my hand and made her turn her head. She let my fingers rest on the cool skin of her cheek, but something in her now steady look, a declaration of inaccessibility, made me take my hand away. Yet our eyes lingered, and hers conveyed both an indication and a warning. Subtlety may win me, but force never will. She turned to face the sea again. "Do you like Maurice?" "This is only the third time I've met him." She appeared to wait for me to go on. "I'm very grateful for his asking me over here, especially," she cut short the compliment. "We all love him very much." "Who is we?" "His other visitors and myself." I could hear the inverted commas. "Visitor" seems an odd way of putting it. "Maurice does not like ghost." I smiled. "Or actress?" Her face betrayed not the least preparedness to concede, to give up her role. "We are all actors and actresses, Mr. Orff, you included." "Of course, on the stage of the world." She smiled and looked down. "Be patient." I couldn't imagine anyone I'd rather be more patient with, or credulous about. She stared out over the sea. Her voice was suddenly lower, more sincere, out of role. "Not for me, for Maurice." "And for Maurice?" "You will understand." "Is that a promise?" "A prediction." There was a sound from the table. She glanced back, then into my eyes. She had the face I had first seen in the music-room door, both amused and conspiratorial, and now appealing as well. "Please pretend." "Okay, but only in his presence." She took my arm and we moved back toward him. He gave us both his little interrogatory headshake. Mr. Orff is very understanding. I am glad. All will be well. She smiled at me and sat down and remained thoughtfully for a while, with her chin resting on her hand. Conchis had poured her a minute glass of crème de menthe, which she sipped. He pointed to an envelope he had put in my place. The manifesto. It took me a long time to find. Read it later. There is an anonymous criticism of great force at the end.